So it's 11 p.m. at night, you're staring at a blank Google Doc, and you know that you still need to outline that episode, record it, edit it, and get it all done before 6 a.m. tomorrow morning when your listener's actually going to be looking for it. And so you tell yourself, well, you know what? I just work better under pressure. It's all good. But deep down, you know that this pace is unsustainable because it drains your energy, it kills your creativity, and honestly, doing this long term is going to make you hate your podcast. So in this episode, I am answering a listener question about where to find time to prep your episodes. And I'm going to reveal what you're risking when you show up with this last minute kind of energy long term for your podcast. I'm also going to show you how to break out of that let me duct tape another episode together at midnight before it airs cycle with the exact system that I use to stay a month ahead on content and still follow inspiration whenever it hits. That way you can plan your podcast without the pressure, you can record without feeling rushed, and you can actually enjoy the process of creating content for your podcast. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. So recently, we got a question from a listener who asked, what tips do you have for finding time to write and rehearse my next podcast episode? And there are a few reasons I love this question, because number one, this is such a common challenge for us as podcast hosts, which is the actual content creation piece of podcasting. We all knew getting into podcasting that podcasting was going to have a time component involved. But if you're anything like me, you had no idea how much time it would actually take you to prep a podcast episode, to record it, to publish it, especially if you're editing yourself, and to actually get it out. And there is a process there that I have dialed in through the years, through a lot of trial and error and a lot of figuring out the ways that it didn't work. And even now, it still takes me hours to prepare a really well thought out podcast episode. Now, I love the process of podcasting. This is my career. So I'm happy to do it because the actual act of podcasting brings me joy. What doesn't bring me joy is when I don't have something batched, when I am up against the clock, and when I'm needing to create content just to get it out. It zaps my creative flow and my creative energy. So we're going to explore exactly what's going on there with that scenario where for some of us, we do enjoy the adrenaline hit that comes whenever we get something out under deadline. And I am very much one of those people. But on the flip side, actually podcasting, because this is such a long form, long game medium, that's just totally unsustainable. The other reason that I love this question is because deeper than that, the actual way that this question is even worded gives us insight into how someone might be approaching the content creation side of their podcast right now. And it's actually a trap because finding time to do anything, that time is not just going to appear on your calendar. And we all know this, but this is one of the biggest mistakes that we as podcast owners and by extension as business owners in our profession tend to make, because typically, there's a tendency to underestimate the amount of time that actually goes into doing something. And in this case, to preparing, to recording, to publishing a single episode. So when you aren't prioritizing that creation time on your calendar first, and then life happens, it is going to be hard to stay consistent. It is going to be hard to keep up with the kind of consistent release schedule that podcasting demands, which ultimately is going to lead you to hating the process of podcasting and wanting to quit. And it happens more often than you think. Because if you hang around the podcasting industry for any length of time, you're going to hear a term thrown about called pod fade. All this means is that there was a podcaster who had a vision that eventually gave up on their dream. The number one reason that most podcasters fade out after just a few months is not only because they didn't see the results that they were expecting to get from their show, but underneath that, they didn't have a plan to stay consistent. So that when life happens, their show disappears. Something that a lot of podcast experts out there are going to try to convince you to believe is that consistency is the key to growth. In reality, that is not true. Because if it were, then everyone who released an episode every single week for a year or more would have a top podcast by now. And we both know that's not the case. Consistency is actually a prerequisite for growth. It is the foundation of growth because consistency is what builds trust. And trust is a prerequisite for retention. And if listeners don't trust you, and if they don't stick around, it's going to be very hard to grow a show. And if you're not growing your show, well, you are going to get frustrated and you are going to give up. And I don't want that for you. So that is the role that consistency plays when it comes to podcast growth. It doesn't directly equal growth, but it is the foundation for it. The problem is a lot of people resist consistency. Because creating content consistently takes work. And so what people will often tell themselves is, well, I don't have enough time to be consistent, or I don't always feel inspired, and then they say, I start to feel boxed in and this and that and the other thing. All that is garbage. Consistency boils down to one simple thing: having a system in place that gives you margin and mental space. And if you are one of those people who says, well, yeah, Courtney, but I work better under pressure and you love to crank out something at 11 p.m. the night before, just because you're addicted to the adrenaline. Believe me, I get it. But it's actually the fast track to podcaster burnout. I was having a conversation the other day with a podcast host, top 10 marketing podcast, who was coming to me asking for help because he releases 3 to 4 episodes every week. He does have a podcast producer, but he said, I'm drowning and I'm afraid to back off because I've had a lot of success with the show and I'm afraid to take my foot off the gas. And at the same time, he knew he couldn't keep going at the pace that he was going because he is going to burn out. And if he doesn't make a change now, he will eventually give up. He will eventually have to do something differently. The goal here isn't to be a successful podcaster who's exhausted every time that you show up to the mic. The goal is to be a successful podcaster who enjoys the process of podcasting. Because by contrast, Stephen Bartlett, host of Diary of a CEO, recently put out a very reflective post on social media. And I found it so fascinating because he recently crossed the 1 billion download milestone with his podcast. This is something that literally only a handful of podcasters have ever done. And he put out this post and he was talking about how he got there. And he said, first of all, I've been doing this for 7 years. He said, second of all, over half of our growth came during the last year, between years 6 and 7. He said, I never would have gotten here if I didn't love the process of podcasting. That was his quote unquote secret to success. And that is, now don't roll your eyes when I say this, that is what batching will do for you. Batching is not about having a rigid schedule. It is not about boxing yourself into a corner where you're only creating podcast content. You never can just take action on what you feel inspired to create in the moment. But it's about giving yourself the structure to stay consistent without sacrificing your creativity or flexibility. Batching is not sexy. Okay. But it is the system that has gotten me to where I am today. And my podcast would not be here without it. Because at the end of the day, you are not just a podcast host. You are a business owner. You are a spouse. You might be a parent. You might be a pet parent. You have other things going on in your life. Maybe you're taking care of aging parents or relatives. Maybe you have a profession that requires your full-time work and focus and attention. And your podcast is something that you're building alongside it. Having a system in place in order to stay consistent is ultimately going to do a few things. Number one, it's going to protect your peace. It's going to protect your sanity. And it's going to give you buffer room to allow for life to happen because we both know that it will. And it's going to help make your show sustainable and help you enjoy the process of podcasting, which is ultimately what's going to be required if you want to get to Stephen Bartlett level of success. Because I don't know anybody that would do something for 7 years if they hate it. And most importantly, what it's going to help you do is stay ahead at all times so that you can stay visible and stay top of mind with your listeners, even when you're sick, even when you're on vacation, even when you're dealing with the life stuff that comes up in the day-to-day of our lives. So I'm going to take you behind the scenes of my process for batching, because even when I had no team, I used to do it all, but I still batch. And it is what saved my show and my sanity. And it is what's gotten me to where I am today. So here's how I do it now. Every single month, we have a designated block of time on my calendar once a month to batch episodes and blog posts. Now, my team knows to protect this time at all costs because our podcast, it's our number one marketing channel. So we treat it like the top priority that it is. And I've calculated and know exactly how long it takes me to prepare an episode. So all in for me, it's about 3.5 hours. That doesn't include writing the blog post. For you, that might be different. Everyone's going to have their own process, and I'm not saying to match my time here. But the time that you devote to creating your episodes is a measure of the dedication of your craft. So what my team does is they calculate how many episodes we have to record that month. Because, some months have 5 weeks, some months have 4. And so they calculate that based on the number of time it takes me to prep an episode, and they block off the appropriate planning, recording, and post-production time that I need. And our guest interviews are also scheduled in advance. So that way, when I sit down to that batching block, I have the content that I need ready. I can title the episode. I can write the show notes. I can record the intro and outro in caps for the episode. So guest interviews, those are also blocked on my calendar. They're not scattered here and there and everywhere. I have set days in the month where I record them. And I promise you, if a guest really wants to be on your show, they will find a way to make the times you have available work. I used to bend to try to fit my guest schedule, and recovering people pleaser over here, all it did was create chaos and resentment for me. So now I set the schedule. And when you do this, it's actually going to elevate your professionalism as a host. So I sit down, I record my content, and then I upload it to our shared Google Drive system, which you're going to learn about in an upcoming lesson. I fill out the episode summary sheet, and I mark the episode ready on the production planner. And that's when my team takes over to actually edit and produce that episode. Now, you might be editing and producing yourself. That's okay. Just account for that time in your batching system. Because the number one killer of podcast momentum After working with dozens, dozens, and dozens and dozens of podcasters through the years, the number one killer of momentum is inconsistency. And the number one way to stay consistent is with a system that you have in place and that works for you before you actually need it. So your goal here, walking away from this lesson, is to design a batching system that works for you. Personally, I like to be a month ahead on our content at all times because my schedule is very extra. There is always something random coming up. It's very unpredictable at times. But at a minimum, I would recommend being 2 weeks ahead at all times. That's going to give you margin so that your podcast doesn't get dropped when life gets busy. Before we dig into how to grow the podcast, how to get it in front of more listeners, how to get the right listeners interested in your show, your consistency is going to be the foundation for that growth. So it's not optional. It is a non-negotiable. It is required for your growth. Life happens. We both know it. The only way to stay consistent through it is to prepare ahead. So walking away from this episode, here are your action steps. You're going to pick your batching rhythm. Are you batching weekly? Are you batching monthly? Are you batching solo content? Are you batching guest content? When are you batching what? Choose how often you're going to record and how many episodes you want done ahead of time. If you're releasing 1 episode every week, stay 2 episodes ahead. That's 2 weeks ahead. Start there. And then you can adjust as you go. Now, here's the step that most people skip. Don't be this person. Go block that time off on your calendar. Choose your recurring batching day or days that you're going to need and protect that time like you would your most important client call. Make it a recurring task and make sure that you treat it as a non-negotiable. Make sure if you have a team that they do the same. Then from there, you're going to plan your first batching sprint and know that your first batching sprint is going to be clunky. It's going to feel a little like disorganized because you're still trying to figure things out. So be patient with yourself. Give yourself a couple rounds of batching to help streamline your process and keep track of how much time things take you as you go. It's going to take a little more time in the beginning, but eventually you'll be able to streamline that. You know exactly how much time it takes, so you'll know exactly what you need to prepare for. And then as you go, I also recommend documenting your process. Jot down what you're doing at each step. Jot down things that eventually you'd like to hand off to a team member or have someone handle for you. And think about it this way. If you had to hand it off tomorrow, what would someone need to know to follow your process? Start building that now. That way, when you're ready to delegate, you have a system already that someone else can plug into. This system, hands down, aside from any of the growth stuff, aside from messaging and SEO and ranking on the charts and guesting on other podcasts and all the other things that you could be doing, this is what's going to keep your podcast going, no matter what's happening in life. It's not glamorous, definitely not sexy. But the good news is it's not complicated. It's simple, and it's designed to help you be more effective at showing up to do the work of hosting your podcast. This has also been the thing that has given my podcast the staying power through the past 5+ years of podcasting and never miss a week of releasing an episode, which is something I'm very proud of. But let's be honest, you're a visionary, you're a creator. The best ideas are not going to hit during batching week. I promise you that. They're going to hit when you're in the shower. They're going to hit when you're walking the dog. They're going to hit when you're unloading groceries from the car and when you don't have a piece of paper to write anything down. And if you don't have a system to catch those ideas when they strike, you're going to forget it. Now, when it comes to planning your podcast episodes, you don't need to chase every idea, but you do need to capture the ideas so that when you sit down to batch, then you can decide what you're going to do with those ideas. I have a running list of dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of topics that I could turn into podcast episodes. And a lot of them have sat on that list for years because at the time it seemed like a good idea. And then the more I sat with it, I was like, well, maybe it's not the right time for an episode like that, or maybe I'll revisit that one later. But I haven't lost the idea. The idea is still there. So at any point, I can decide if I want to do something with it. I can take action on that idea. Other ideas that have been sitting on that list do become episodes, and many of them have. So when you have a system like this, where you can kind of capture all the different inputs, the thoughts going through your brain, as well as the questions that maybe you're getting from clients and customers and leads, as well as conversations that you have on an everyday basis or rants, things that really bother you or that you're passionate about, you can capture all of these things. And then when you sit down to batch, you have all those ideas at your fingertips. So here's what I recommend. First, you need to have a go-to place for capturing those ideas. Because if you have sticky notes and then you have something written down over here in a notebook, and then you have something over here in your phone notes, and then something over there on the fridge or on your laptop or wherever you keep all of your ideas, it's going to get really messy. And you're going to be like, okay, I don't know where, maybe you're emailing those ideas to yourself. You're like, I don't know where to even look for this thing. In any case, this system has saved me so many times, and it saved me so much headache anytime I sit down to batch because I know all my ideas are right there and I know right where to go to find them. You don't have to overthink the formatting here. It doesn't have to be like this perfectly well thought out thought. It can be a phrase. It can be a reminder. It can be a rough episode title or a draft episode title. It can be a rant idea. Nobody cares about your mic quality if your message is boring, right? It could be just any and all ideas that come to you. The point is to have different categories for your ideas. For me, I love to have the rant section, and I love to have the FAQ section, and I love to have the random thoughts out of Courtney's brain section, because that is how then when I sit down to batch, I can look and I can sort all of those things and I can review those ideas, and the ideas are grouped together so that nothing gets missed, so that nothing gets overlooked, and so that it's very simple to go through your list and decide, you know what? Okay, I think it's time for a rant. Let's turn one of those into a real episode. Or, you know what? This would make a really good solo episode topic. Or, I'm not an expert on this topic, but this is something my listeners are asking me for. Let me see what kind of guest I could bring in to speak to this topic. And then when you're batching, you're going to look at those ideas and you're going to take some of them and you're going to add some of them to your production list. Some of those ideas are never going to see the light of day. And that's okay too. But the point of this system is about creating a bank of ideas so that when it's batching time, you're not starting from scratch. You're not sitting there staring at a blank sheet saying, oh my gosh, I've got to outline an episode this week and I don't really know what to talk about. So this is going to help you protect your creativity, and it's going to help you protect your sanity while keeping you consistent. Now, if you want another example of this in action, then I encourage you, go listen to my episode with Joe Casabona, because he shares how he plans a full season of content using this same principle. I always find it can be super helpful to have examples from other people too, because that might spark an idea for you that changes the game. Because at the end of the day, capturing these ideas when they strike you ultimately gives you options whenever it is time to sit down and to create content. You can put it on that list. You'll know exactly where to find it. So you can kind of set it and forget it in that sense. And then when it is time to create episodes, you can come back to those ideas and bring them to life. So I hope that this was helpful for you, because I want to see you succeed with your podcast. The reality is, podcasting is no joke. There is a reason why people say it is the hardest platform to keep up with and to grow. But if you're someone who genuinely loves the process like I do, then make it your top priority to figure out how to make this medium work for you, so that the inevitable pressures of trying to keep up with the podcast don't just come in and suck the joy right out of the process for you. Because I will be so brutally honest with you right now, in my 5+ years of podcasting, as much as I love this medium, there have been many times where I haven't loved the particular act of getting an episode out into the world, because it has been rushed, because it has felt like there's just this pressure around it. And when I'm stressed, my team gets stressed, and everybody suffers the consequences. If I fall behind on batching, gosh, it really throws things off. If life happens, like we had this snowstorm here in New Orleans, completely out of the blue, more snow than we've ever had since 1895 or something ridiculous like that. And it was literally threw off the week that I had planned to batch guest episodes, and it threw everything off. And so yes, you can plan ahead all you want, but inevitably, there are going to also be some unforeseen things that happen that you just can't avoid, that you just have to deal with. So in sharing this system with you, I want you to remember, most importantly, the goal here is not to be rigid. It's not to be perfect. It's not to have the expectation that now because I have this system, everything's going to go exactly according to plan. Ask me how I know. It doesn't work that way. But I will tell you that having a system like this has been the thing that has kept this show going for over 5 years, amidst all of my professional responsibilities and personal responsibilities as a CEO, as a wife, and as a mom. And that's why in the next episode, I'm going to show you what you can do when life does happen, and when you have nothing batched, and when you know you need an episode to go out and you don't want to kill the momentum that you've worked so hard to build. I'm actually going to show you 8 ways that you can come up with content on the fly, not as the norm, but as your exception to the rule when the inevitable ish hits the fan and you've got nothing else batched scenarios. All right, so don't worry. Got your fallback plan. Come with me to the next episode, and let's make your business binge-worthy.